in the Breonna Taylor raid has been sentenced to 33 months in prison. Tyrone Bowman, live. According to BBC News, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. A former Kentucky police officer has been sentenced to 33 months in prison after being convicted in connection with a raid that resulted in the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor, a black woman, in her home. A federal jury last year found Brett Hankinson guilty of violating Taylor's civil rights by using excessive force. The maximum sentence for the charge was life in prison. The sentencing comes days after the Trump administration asked the judge to give Hankinson a one-day sentence, a position that starkly contrasts with the approach to the case under President Joe Biden. Hankinson is the only officer who has been charged and convicted directly in connection with the botched raid. It seems likely that this officer somewhere along the line will be paroled unconditionally. Another former officer, Kelly Goodleft, who pleaded guilty to conspiring with a colleague to falsify the affidavit used to obtain a search warrant for Taylor's home and to cover up their actions after her death, will be sentenced next year. After his sentence, Hankinson will face 3 years of supervised release. Tamika Palmer, Taylor's mother, and lawyers for the family spoke after the sentencing on Monday. Quote, "I think the judge did the best she could with what she had to work with." Ms. Palmer said, but she was critical of federal prosecutors who had argued for a lesser sentence. Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, who was in the apartment with her the night of the raid, said he was grateful for the small piece of justice that we got. Taylor became a face of the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, following her death and the police killing of George Floyd, who was murdered during a police arrest that same year. She was killed after officers in plain clothes executed a no-knock warrant at her home. They burst into her apartment in the early morning hours. While she and Walker were asleep, authorities believe Taylor's former boyfriend was using her home to hide narcotics. Mr. Walker fired a single shot when the police knocked the door down, hitting one officer, Sergeant John Mattingly. In the lay, Mr. Walker said the officers did not announce themselves as police, and he thought they were intruders. The 3 officers returned fire, shooting 32 bullets into the flat. Hankinson fired 7 times into her apartment in order, he said during the trial, to protect fellow officers. None of Hankinson's bullets hit anyone, but they did enter a neighboring property where a pregnant woman, a 5-year-old, and a man had been sleeping. Prosecutors said Hankinson acted recklessly and violated one of the most fundamental rules of deadly force. If they cannot see the person they're shooting at, they cannot pull the trigger. This is ironic since the officers who prosecuted him, then they turn around and ask for a one-day sentence. Some things just don't add up here. In early November 2024, Hankinson was convicted on 1 count of civil rights abuse. His use of deadly force was unlawful and put Ms. Taylor in harm's way, then Attorney General Merrick Garland, a Biden appointee, said in a statement. This verdict is an important step toward accountability for the violation of Breonna Taylor's civil rights, but justice for the loss of Ms. Taylor is a task that exceeds human capacity. Days after Hankinson's conviction, Donald Trump won re-election, a political shift that meant the sentencing recommendation would come not from the Biden administration, which brought the charges, but from the Trump-led Justice Department. Last week, that recommendation, a request for Hankinson to serve 1 day in prison, stunned some, including Breonna Taylor's family. Every American who believes in equal justice under the law should be outraged. Attorneys for the family said recommending just 1 day in prison sends the unmistakable message that white officers can violate the civil rights of Black Americans with total impunity. In his sentencing request, the Justice Department argued that although Hankinson was involved in executing the warrant during the deadly raid, he did not shoot Taylor and is not otherwise responsible for her death. The Justice Department also said that additional prison time would simply be unjust under these circumstances. Ordinarily, sentencing recommendations are signed by lawyers involved in the case or career Justice Department employees who deal with sentencing results. In this case, Trump's appointee to run the Civil Rights Department, Harmet Dilhalan, signed the recommendation. Since returning to the White House, Trump has made rolling back Biden-era policies a priority, particularly at the Justice Department. In May, the Justice Department began the process of dismissing lawsuits brought against the Louisville and Minneapolis following controversy over high-profile police killings and brutality, including that of Taylor. Investigation into police constitutional violations in other cases such as Memphis and Phoenix were also ended. The Justice Department criticized the Biden administration for enhancing sweeping oversight agreements that would have imposed years of micromanagement of local police by federal courts. During Biden's tenure, the Justice Department opened civil investigations into 12 states and local law enforcement offices. I can sum all this up right here. That had been a bunch of black officers who did the same exact thing. Believe me, they would have not been asking for a one-day sentence. Never surrender, never quit.